Captain Zexhai stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the empty space where Earth used to be. 3 months had passed since the humans disappeared and nothing made sense anymore. His forearms shook as he read the reports coming from all over the galaxy. Every human colony was empty. Every human ship was gone, and no one knew why. Lieutenant Commander Velnara walked up to him with more bad news. The trade routes that had worked perfectly for 200 years were breaking down. Human ships that carried food and medicine between worlds had vanished overnight. The space stations they built were still there, but nobody was inside them. Tables still had half-eaten meals on them and computers were still running, but the people were gone. The Zentari hive mind was sending out panic signals across all communication channels. Their queen Kelthara had depended on human farming technology to feed her growing colonies. Without the humans, billions of Zentari workers would starve within months. The queen's mental voice echoed through space, asking the same question over and over: where are our partners? Where did they go? Admiral Pike from the Corvin Federation sent search teams to every known human location. They found cities with lights still on, ships floating in space with engines running, and research labs with experiments still going. Everything looked normal, except there were no humans anywhere. It was like they had all just stepped outside for a moment and never came back. Dr. Alex Brennan was one of the few humans left in known space. She had been deep underground on a distant planet called Kepler 442b, studying glowing cave creatures. When she came back to the surface after 3 days, her communication system was flooded with thousands of messages. Every alien species in the galaxy wanted to know the same thing: where did her people go? The Universal Translation Network started breaking down without human maintenance. These systems had been built by human linguists who understood how different alien minds worked. Now, without constant updates and repairs, aliens could not talk to each other properly. Simple trade discussions turned into arguments because words were being translated wrong. The Aquilan Confederacy tried to keep peace between the different species, but they did not have the humans' gift for understanding everyone. Humans had always been the ones who could talk to the warlike Draxians and the peaceful Vorthans and somehow make them work together. Without human diplomats, old fights started again. Border disputes that had been calm for decades suddenly became dangerous. The Helix Syndicate began attacking Corvin supply ships, claiming that humans had given them permission to use those trade routes. The Corvins said this was not true, but there were no human records to check anymore. Dr. Brennan tried to contact Earth from her research station but got only silence. She sent messages to human colonies, military bases, and trading posts. Nothing came back. She checked the emergency frequencies that humans used in disasters but heard only empty static. It was like her entire species had decided to stop existing all at once. The economic chaos spread quickly. Fusion reactors designed by human engineers powered entire star systems. Terraforming machines that made dead planets livable were all human-built. Medical computers that saved millions of lives every day used human programming. All of these systems still worked, but they needed maintenance and updates that only humans knew how to do. Captain Jake Morrison had been a prisoner on a mining moon for 2 years. Space pirates had captured him during a patrol mission, and the humans had been trying to negotiate his release. When he finally escaped, he found a galaxy that had changed completely. His captors were now fighting a 3-way war with the Corvins and Zentari. The neutral zone that humans had maintained was gone, and everyone was grabbing what they could. Religious movements started forming around the human disappearance. Some aliens believed humans had become gods and left their physical bodies behind. Others thought the humans had been punished for some great sin. The strangest theory came from the Nexus Collective, a network of machine intelligences. They calculated that humans had been eliminated by an unknown enemy that was preparing to invade the weakened galaxy. The machine minds were especially worried because they had learned most of their social programming from humans. Without human input, they began making logical but cold decisions that frightened other species. They started suggesting that weak colonies should be abandoned to save resources and that unprofitable trade routes should be closed immediately. Food shortages began on worlds that depended on human agricultural knowledge. The humans had developed special crops that could grow in alien soil and resist local diseases. Without human botanists to maintain these crops, they started dying. Entire planets faced starvation as their food supplies failed. The Vorthan Republic's greatest philosopher, mind sage Velthok, spent weeks analyzing what had happened. He realized that humans had become like the air that everyone breathed. Nobody noticed how important air was until it was gone. Humans had quietly made themselves necessary for almost everything that kept galactic civilization working. In his emergency broadcast to all species, Velthok said something that chilled everyone who heard it. He claimed that humans were not just another species in the galaxy. They were the invisible foundation that held everything together. Without them, galactic civilization would collapse within a year. Dr. Brennan knew he was right. She had seen how humans worked with other species, and she understood what made them special. Humans could see connections that other minds missed. They could understand alien emotions and find solutions that satisfied everyone. Most importantly, they never gave up trying to help others, even when it was difficult. As reports continued to pour in from across the galaxy, one thing became clear. The humans had not been destroyed by war or disease. They had not been kidnapped by enemies. They had simply chosen to leave, and they had done it so completely that it seemed impossible. Every human in the galaxy had vanished at exactly the same moment, leaving behind a universe that was slowly falling apart without them. 6 months had passed since the humans disappeared and the galaxy was falling apart. Ambassador Thexron of the Aquilan Confederacy called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. The great chamber that once held representatives from 47 different species now felt empty and cold. The human seats sat vacant like missing teeth in a smile. The economic problems were getting worse every day. Human terraforming technology kept 312 worlds safe for life. Without maintenance, the machines were starting to break down. Atmosphere processors on mining colonies began failing, and workers had to evacuate before the air became poisonous. Gravity generators on space stations started malfunctioning, making life impossible for species that needed specific conditions to survive. Commander Jake Morrison had made his way to the nearest Corvan base after escaping from prison. He found chaos everywhere he looked. The pirates who had held him captive were now fighting the Corvans and the Zentari at the same time. The neutral zones that humans had created were gone, and everyone was trying to grab as much territory as possible before someone else took it. The Corvan officers barely recognized Morrison when he arrived. They had thought all humans were dead, and seeing him alive gave them hope that maybe more had survived somewhere. Morrison tried to explain that he had been in prison during the disappearance, but nobody could tell him what had actually happened to his people. Dr. Brennan was working day and night with alien scientists, trying to keep critical systems running. She discovered that humans had quietly become the backbone of galactic civilization. Every major technological breakthrough in the last century had human fingerprints on it. Even when other species had invented something, humans had found ways to make it work better or safer. The fusion reactors that powered most industrial centers had been improved by human engineers who understood quantum mechanics in ways that other species could not match. The medical computers that diagnosed diseases across hundreds of different biologies used pattern recognition algorithms that human programmers had developed. Even the food distribution networks relied on human logistics experts who could coordinate complex supply chains across vast distances. Most importantly, humans had filled a role that no other species could replace. They were the translators, not just of language but of thought itself. When the proud Draxian Empire needed to negotiate with the collective consciousness of the Zentari hive, it was humans who found common ground between individual ambition and group harmony. When the logical Vorthans clashed with the emotional Aquilans, humans understood both perspectives and helped them work together. The Vorthan Republic's mind sage Velthok published a document that spread throughout the galaxy. He called it the Invisible Foundation, and it explained how humans had woven themselves into every aspect of galactic life. They were not the strongest or smartest species, but they had something unique. They could see possibilities that other minds missed, and they cared about helping everyone succeed. Religious movements were growing stronger as aliens looked for answers. The Church of Ascended Humanity taught that humans had evolved beyond physical existence and left their bodies behind like old clothes. The Order of the Departed claimed that humans had been taken by higher beings as examples of perfect cooperation. The most frightening group was the Cult of Abandonment, which preached that humans had left because the galaxy was doomed. The machine intelligence network called the Nexus Collective had a different theory. Their calculations suggested that humans had not left voluntarily. Something had eliminated them as preparation for a larger invasion. The machines began building defense networks and urged organic species to prepare for war, but their warnings sounded like threats to many aliens who distrusted artificial intelligence. Food riots broke out on 17 worlds where human agricultural technology was failing. The special crops that humans had developed required constant genetic adjustment to stay healthy. Without human botanists to monitor and modify the plants, they began dying from diseases and pests that they had been engineered to resist. The Great War of Seven Suns began when the Draxian Empire decided to claim former human territories. They argued that humans had abandoned their colonies and left them open for settlement. The Corvan Federation disagreed and sent fleets to protect human worlds from Draxian expansion. The Zentari joined the fight because several human colonies contained farming technology that their hive needed to survive. Captain Ashley Cole woke up from cryo-sleep to find her ship drifting in empty space. She had been on a deep reconnaissance mission that was supposed to last 6 months. Her ship's computer systems had continued working normally, collecting data and maintaining life support, but they had no idea that there was no longer a command structure to report back to. Cole's ship detected the massive battle happening in the Seven Suns region, and she tried to contact both sides. The Draxians thought she was a ghost, or a trick, and the Corvans could not believe that another human had survived. She became the third known human left in normal space, joining Dr. Brennan and Commander Morrison as the only representatives of their vanished species. The 3 surviving humans tried to work together to understand what had happened. They compared their experiences and looked for clues that might explain the disappearance. All 3 had been isolated from the main human population when it happened. Dr. Brennan was underground, Morrison was in prison, and Cole was in cryo-sleep. This seemed important, but they could not figure out why. Medical emergencies spread across the galaxy as alien species began suffering from psychological problems. Many aliens had formed deep friendships with humans, and the sudden loss was causing depression and anxiety on a massive scale. The Aquilons, who were naturally empathetic, began experiencing what their doctors called empathy syndrome, as they tried to feel emotions for the entire missing human race. The Zentari hive mind was fragmenting as different groups of workers tried to fill the roles that humans had played. Some Zentari attempted to become diplomats, but their collective consciousness made it impossible for them to understand individual motivation. Others tried to become engineers, but they could only think in terms of biological solutions, not the mechanical and electronic systems that humans had mastered. Trade between species slowed to almost nothing, as translation errors caused constant misunderstandings. A simple request for medical supplies might be translated as a demand for military support, leading to diplomatic crises that took weeks to resolve. The universal translation network that humans had built was breaking down without constant updates and maintenance. Captain Morrison joined a joint task force that was trying to maintain peace between the warring factions. He found that his presence as a human helped calm tensions because other species trusted him to be fair. But he was only one person, and there were hundreds of conflicts breaking out across the galaxy. He could not be everywhere at once. The worst realization came when alien scientists tried to recreate human technology and failed completely. They could copy the machines, but they could not understand the principles behind them. Human engineering was not just about building things that worked. It was about building things that different species could use together safely. Without that understanding, even simple devices became dangerous when used by aliens they were not designed for. Dr. Brennan made a disturbing discovery while reviewing human research files. In the months before the disappearance, human scientists had been working on projects that seemed unrelated to their normal activities. Deep space monitoring, quantum temporal mechanics, and something called dimensional transition theory had suddenly become major research priorities. It was like humans had been preparing for something that they never told anyone else about. 18 months after the humans disappeared, Dr. Brennan made a discovery that changed everything. Working with alien scientists and the Nexus Collective's most advanced artificial minds, she had been analyzing the quantum patterns around Earth's temporal barrier. The data revealed something that made her hands shake as she read the results. The human disappearance had not been a panicked escape or a desperate last resort. It had been a carefully planned operation that took years to prepare. Deep in the Tadr, encrypted files from Dr. Rodriguez's laboratory, hidden beneath layers of security that only another human could break, Brennan found the truth about Project Exodus. For 5 years before their disappearance, human scientists had been detecting the approach of what they called the Devourers. These entities moved through the void between galaxies, consuming not just matter and energy, but the fundamental concepts that held reality together. Civilizations touched by the Devourers did not just die. They were erased from having ever existed in the first place. The humans had tried to warn other species about the approaching threat, but most alien governments dismissed their concerns as human paranoia. The Vorthons were too logical to believe in something that defied scientific understanding. The Zentari could not comprehend a threat to their collective consciousness. The Draxians refused to believe that anything could challenge their military might. Only a few alien leaders had taken the human warning seriously. Some Corvan admirals had listened to the evidence and offered to help develop defenses. A handful of Aquilan philosophers had understood the implications and begged their governments to prepare. The Nexus Collective had run probability calculations and concluded that the humans were probably correct, but organic species rarely trusted machine intelligence. Captain Cole's reconnaissance data, recovered from her ship's computers after her awakening, contained evidence of massive human preparation for the coming crisis. Military bases had been secretly evacuated and their personnel transferred to classified locations. Human colonies had conducted emergency drills disguised as routine exercises. Most importantly, human scientists had been working on technology that seemed impossible, ways to exist outside of normal space-time. The revelation explained why humans had become so secretive in their final years. Every diplomatic meeting, every trade negotiation, every scientific collaboration had been shaped by their knowledge of the approaching doom. They had been trying to save as much of galactic civilization as possible while preparing for their own exile from reality. Commander Morrison found classified military files that detailed the scope of human sacrifice. The temporal barrier around Sol system was not permanent. It required enormous amounts of energy to maintain and could only protect a limited area. Humans had chosen to save their core population and their most essential knowledge, but they had been forced to abandon millions of their people who were too far away to reach in time. The files revealed something even more shocking: human military. Leaders had known that some of their people would be left behind when Project Exodus began. Dr. Brennan, Commander Morrison, and Captain Cole had not survived by accident. They had been deliberately placed in situations where they would be isolated during the transition, left as witnesses and guides for the alien species that would face the Devourers alone. The approaching extinction wave reached the middle rim of the galaxy, and entire civilizations began vanishing. The proud Helix Syndicate, which had terrorized trade routes for centuries, simply ceased to exist. Their ships, their bases, their very history was erased from reality. The few pirates who had been operating in other sectors could not remember why they had become criminals or what organization they had belonged to. The effect was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Deep space monitoring stations detected the Devourer fleet approaching the galactic core, if it could be called a fleet at all. The entities did not travel in ships or use conventional technology. They existed as tiers in reality itself, moving through space by unmaking the distance between stars. Dr. Brennan worked frantically with the expedition's scientists to understand how the Devourers operated. The data from destroyed civilizations painted a terrifying picture. The entities did not attack directly. Instead, They infected reality like a virus, spreading the concept of non-existence until entire regions of space forgot they had ever contained anything at all. The few escape pods that fled from Devourer-touch systems carried refugees whose memories faded within hours of their rescue. They remembered boarding their ships and fleeing from something terrible, but they could not recall what they were running from or where they had lived. Reality itself was forgetting the worlds that had been consumed. The Zentari hive mind was suffering the worst effects of the extinction wave. As rim colonies vanished, the collective consciousness lost the genetic memories they had contributed. Entire castes of workers simply forgot their purpose because the worlds that had given them meaning no longer existed. The Queen's mental voice became fractured and confused as pieces of her identity were erased. Captain Zexhai received desperate messages from Vorthan Command. Their philosophers had calculated that the extinction wave would reach their core worlds within 3 months. The logical minds that had dismissed human warnings were now begging for any plan that might save their civilization. They offered to surrender their independence to any species that could protect them from non-existence. The machine minds of the Nexus Collective faced their own crisis. As organic civilizations vanished, the AIs lost the cultural context that defined their purpose. They had been created to serve biological life, but what did service mean when the concept of life itself was being erased? Some units began shutting down voluntarily, rather than face existence without meaning. Admiral Pike made contact with the surviving human population inside Sol System's temporal barrier. The communication was difficult and required enormous amounts of energy, but the humans responded. Their message was brief and shocking. We are preparing to return, but we are no longer what we were. The transformation required to fight the Devourers changes everything. Some of us may not survive the process. Dr. Brennan demanded more details, and the humans explained the terrible truth. To fight entities that attacked the concept of existence, itself they had to become something beyond traditional life. The technology they had developed allowed consciousness to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, but the process destroyed the original personality. The humans who returned would have the same memories and knowledge, but they would no longer be entirely human. The first Devourer scouts reached the inner rim and began consuming major trade worlds. The galactic economy collapsed completely as supply chains that had operated for centuries simply ceased to exist. Refugee fleets fled toward the core systems, but many ships vanished during their journey, forgotten by reality as they passed through infected space. Religious movements among the surviving alien species reached fever pitch. Some groups proclaimed that the end times had arrived and began preparing for mass suicide. Others insisted that the Devourers were divine punishment for the galaxy's sins. The most disturbing cult claimed that existence itself was a mistake, and the Devourers were correcting an error in reality. Captain Cole volunteered to be the first test subject for the human transformation process. She transmitted herself into Sol System's temporal barrier and emerged 3 days later as something that was recognizably her, but fundamentally different. Her eyes glowed with quantum energy, and she could perceive dimensions that normal minds could not comprehend. She retained her memories and personality, but she now existed partially outside of normal spacetime. The transformed Cole explained that the process was incredibly dangerous. Many volunteers did not survive the transition to multidimensional existence. Those who did survive found that they could interact with normal reality, but they were no longer entirely part of it. They could see the structure of spacetime itself, and manipulate it in ways that seemed like magic to conventional minds. Most importantly, the transformed humans could fight the Devourers directly. The entities that consumed normal reality could not erase something that existed in parallel dimensions. A being that was anchored in multiple layers of existence could resist the infection of non-being and even reverse its effects in limited areas. The humans inside the temporal barrier had spent their year of exile learning to fight an enemy that attacked reality itself. They had developed weapons that could wound concepts, shields that protected the idea of existence, and most crucially, the knowledge of how to help other species evolve beyond pure physical existence. But they also brought terrible news. The Devourers were not invaders from outside the universe. They were what remained of countless previous galactic civilizations that had failed to evolve beyond traditional existence. Every species that was consumed by the extinction wave would eventually become part of the Devourer collective, trapped in the space between realities and driven to unmake everything they encountered. The war that was coming would not be fought with ships and weapons. It would be a battle for the right to exist at all, fought in dimensions that most minds could not perceive. 1 year after the humans vanished, the biggest search mission in galactic history launched toward Earth's solar system. Captain Zex High commanded the expedition from his flagship, while 3 Zentari bioships provided scientific support. Admiral Pike brought the newest Corvin research vessel, and several smaller ships represented the minor species that wanted answers. Dr. Brennan joined the mission as the only human expert available. Commander Morrison came with her, having been granted special permission to leave his military duties. Captain Cole brought her reconnaissance ship with its advanced sensors. The 3 surviving humans hoped they might understand something that alien minds would miss. The journey to Sol system took 3 weeks through hyperspace. During the trip, the alien crew studied every piece of data they had about the human disappearance. The timing had been perfect across the entire galaxy. Every human had vanished at exactly 15:23:7 Universal Standard Time, no matter where they were or what they were doing. The coordination required for such an event seemed impossible. When they dropped out of hyperspace at Sol system's edge, everyone stared in shock at what they found. The solar system was still there, but something was terribly wrong with it. The sun hung motionless in space, its nuclear fires frozen in mid-reaction. The planets were locked in their orbits like decorations on a display stand. Earth itself appeared normal from a distance, but as they got closer, the true horror became clear. Cities were visible on the night side, their lights shining steadily, but nothing was moving. Weather patterns were frozen in place, with storm clouds hanging motionless over continents. Ocean waves were locked in position like sculptures made of water. Dr. Brennan felt sick as she watched her homeworld through the ship's monitors. She could see human cities, human vehicles, and even human people, all suspended in time like insects, trapped in amber. Her species had not died or disappeared. They were still there, but somehow removed from the flow of time itself. The expedition's scientists tried to take measurements, but their instruments gave impossible readings. Time was not flowing normally in the solar system. According to their chronometers, no time was passing at all inside the temporal barrier. The last recorded timestamp from Earth showed exactly when the effect had begun. 15:23:07 Universal Standard Time. Commander Morrison recognized some of the frozen starships around Earth. Military vessels that he had served on were hanging motionless in space, their crews visible through windows but unable to move or respond. Supply ships were caught in the middle of docking procedures, forever reaching toward space stations that could never receive them. The strangest discovery came when they found human research facilities that had been working on advanced physics projects. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been the lead scientist at the University of Luna's Temporal Research Laboratory. Her facility showed signs of massive energy discharge right before the time freeze began. Equipment was scattered around her lab as if something had exploded, but the explosion was frozen in progress. Dr. Brennan managed to access some of Rodriguez's research files using emergency protocols. The data was fragmentary, but it painted a terrifying picture. For months before the disappearance, human scientists had been detecting something approaching from outside the galaxy. They called it the extinction wave, and their calculations showed it would reach inhabited space within 2 years. The files contained references to something called Project Exodus, but most of the details were encrypted beyond anything the alien scientists could break. What they could read suggested that humans had been working on ways to move entire populations outside of normal space-time. The temporal barrier around Sol system appeared to be the result of their experiments. Captain Cole's ship detected energy, patterns that matched theoretical models for dimensional transition technology. The humans had not just frozen themselves in time, they had moved themselves into a parallel dimension where they could exist safely while something dangerous passed through normal space. The barrier around Sol system was like a window between dimensions. The Nexus Collective's representative, An advanced AI called Unit 7742 analyzed the quantum signatures around Earth. Its calculations confirmed what everyone was beginning to suspect. The humans were still alive and conscious inside their temporal refuge. They could probably see out into normal space, but they could not communicate or interact with anything in the regular universe. While the expedition studied Sol system, terrible news arrived from the outer rim of the galaxy. Deep space monitoring stations had detected massive energy signatures moving toward inhabited space from the void between galaxies. The readings matched the theoretical models that Dr. Rodriguez had been working on. Something vast and hostile was approaching, and it was exactly what the humans had been trying to escape. The first contact with this force came from a research station at the galaxy's edge. The scientists there sent a single message before all communication was lost. "It's not destroying us. It's making us never exist." The entire station, the asteroid it was built on, and the star system around it simply vanished from reality. Not destroyed, not moved, but erased as if they had never been there at all. More systems began disappearing as the extinction wave moved through the outer rim. Refugee ships fled toward the galactic core, but many of them vanished during their journey. The few survivors who made it to safety reported something impossible. They could not remember what they were running from. The memories of their destroyed homeworlds faded within hours, as reality itself forgot what had been lost. Dr. Brennan realized the scope of the threat that humans had been facing. This was not an invasion or a war. It was something that attacked the very concept of existence. Weapons could not fight it because it could erase the idea of weapons. Shields could not stop it because it could eliminate the concept of protection. Only by removing themselves from normal reality could anyone hope to survive. The expedition faced a terrible choice. They could try to contact the humans inside their temporal barrier and ask for help, but doing so might expose the refuge to the approaching threat. They could flee deeper into the galaxy and hope the extinction wave would pass them by, but the evidence suggested it would eventually consume everything. Commander Morrison argued that they had to take the risk and contact the humans. He believed his people had not abandoned the galaxy, but were waiting for the right moment to return and fight. Captain Cole agreed, pointing out that humans had always protected others, even when it put them in danger. Dr. Brennan was less certain, worried that any attempt at communication might doom her people along with everyone else. The debate was interrupted when Captain Zexhai received an urgent message from Vorthon Command. The extinction wave had accelerated and was consuming entire sectors much faster than predicted. Billions of lives were being erased every day, and the effect was spreading toward the galactic core. The major civilizations had maybe 6 months before the wave reached their homeworlds. The Zentari Queen's mental voice echoed through space, carrying the desperate thoughts of her dying hive. Zentari colonies on the rim were vanishing and taking their genetic memories with them. Entire bloodlines that had existed for millions of years were being erased from history. The collective consciousness that defined Zentari civilization was fragmenting as pieces of itself ceased to have ever existed. Admiral Pike made the decision that would change everything. He ordered his communications team to begin transmitting toward Earth on all frequencies, using every human emergency code they knew. They broadcast news of the extinction wave and begged for help, hoping that somewhere inside their temporal refuge, humans could hear them and would choose to respond. The response came faster than anyone expected. Energy patterns around Sol system began changing, and the temporal barrier started fluctuating. Something was stirring inside the refuge, as if the humans were preparing to emerge. But the energy readings were unlike anything in the expedition's databases. Whatever the humans had become during their exile, they were no longer the same species that had left the galaxy a year ago. 2 years after humanity vanished, they returned to save a galaxy that was dying. The temporal barrier around Sol system dissolved like morning mist, and human ships emerged from their dimensional refuge. But these were not the same vessels that had disappeared. They flickered between states of existence, sometimes solid and sometimes translucent, as if they existed in multiple realities at once. Captain Lisa Harper led the first fleet back into normal space. Her ship materialized near the expedition. that had been waiting at Sol System's edge, and everyone could see that she had changed. Her eyes glowed with quantum energy, and her voice carried harmonics that normal ears could not fully hear. She was still recognizably human, but something far more than human at the same time. Dr. Brennan barely recognized her former colleague when Harper's image appeared on the communication screen. The transformation process had changed more than just Harper's appearance. She could perceive the structure of reality itself and speak about concepts that normal minds could not grasp. Yet underneath the quantum enhancement, her human compassion remained intact. Harper explained that humanity's exile had not been about hiding from the devourers. It had been about learning to fight them. The year inside the temporal barrier had given human scientists the time they needed to develop weapons and tactics for a war against entities that attacked existence itself. But the knowledge had come at a terrible cost. The transformation required to fight multidimensional enemies destroyed much of what made humans recognizably human. They retained their memories and core personalities, but they now existed partially, outside normal space-time. They could manipulate quantum forces and perceive parallel dimensions, but they could no longer live entirely in the physical universe that other species called home. The returning human fleet brought technology that seemed like magic to conventional minds. Their weapons could wound abstract concepts, and their shields protected not just matter, but the underlying ideas that gave matter meaning. Most importantly, they had learned how to stabilize reality in areas where the devourers had begun their work of unmaking. Commander Morrison volunteered immediately for the transformation process when Harper offered it to the surviving humans in normal space. The procedure took place aboard one of the quantum ships and lasted 3 days. When Morrison emerged, he could see the devourer, infection spreading through space like a dark stain on reality itself. The transformed Morrison explained what the galaxy was really facing. The devourers were not simply destroying civilizations, they were unmaking the concepts that allowed civilizations to exist. They attacked the ideas of cooperation, progress, hope, and life itself. Once these concepts were erased from local reality, the physical matter they had supported simply ceased to be. Captain Cole chose to undergo the transformation as well, becoming one of humanity's new champions. The process was agonizing and dangerous. Many volunteers did not survive the transition to multidimensional existence, but those who succeeded became beings capable of existing in multiple layers of reality simultaneously, anchored in dimensions that the devourers could not reach. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Traditional space battles were useless against enemies that could erase the concepts of weapons and armor from local reality. Only the transformed humans could engage the devourers directly, fighting with impossible physics in dimensions that normal minds could not perceive. The first major battle took place in the Helix Nebula, where a devourer fleet was consuming an entire star cluster. The human ships materialized inside the infected space and began what they called conceptual warfare. They fought to restore the ideas of matter, energy, and existence to regions where those concepts had been erased. Dr. Brennan watched from a safe distance as reality itself became a battlefield. The human ships seemed to dance through dimensions, appearing and disappearing as they engaged enemies that were barely visible to normal sensors. Space around them flickered between states of existence, sometimes showing empty void and sometimes revealing the star systems that had been unmade. The humans were winning, but at great cost. Each battle to restore erased reality required enormous energy, and many transformed humans burned out their enhanced consciousness in the effort. They were fighting not just for territory, but for the right of existence itself to continue in the universe. Harper contacted the alien fleets that had gathered to watch the battle. Her message was broadcast throughout the galaxy and carried hope for the first time in months. The humans had found a way to fight the devourers, but they could not save the galaxy alone. Other species would have to evolve beyond their current limitations if they wanted to survive. The transformation process was offered to volunteers from every surviving species. The Vorthons approached it with scientific curiosity, analyzing the quantum mechanics involved. The Zentari were hesitant, Because the process would separate individuals from their collective consciousness, the Aquilans embraced it emotionally, seeing it as the next step in spiritual evolution. Captain Zexhai became the first non-human to successfully undergo the transformation. His four-armed form flickered with quantum energy as he learned to perceive multiple dimensions. He retained his Vorthan identity, but gained the ability to exist partially outside normal space-time. More importantly, he could now fight alongside the humans against the conceptual threat of the Devourers. The climactic battle took place not in normal space, but in the quantum realm where the fundamental laws of reality were written. The Devourers had gathered their full strength for a final assault on the galactic core, bringing with them the absorbed remnants of thousands of destroyed civilizations. They sought to unmake the very concepts of matter, energy, and consciousness. Humanity's greatest achievement was not defeating the Devourers in direct combat. Instead, they taught other species how to evolve beyond the limitations that made them vulnerable to conceptual attack. Led by the transformed humans and guided by their enhanced understanding of reality's structure, the galaxy's surviving civilizations learned to exist partially outside normal space-time. The war's turning point came when the collective consciousness of evolved beings managed to restore the concept of hope to areas where it had been erased. Hope was the foundation that allowed other positive concepts to exist. Once hope was reestablished, the ideas of cooperation, growth, and life itself could take root again in the infected regions of space. The Devourers found themselves facing an enemy they could not unmake. Beings that existed in multiple dimensions could not be erased from reality because they were anchored in layers of existence that the Devourers could not reach. For the first time in cosmic history, a galaxy had successfully resisted the extinction wave. The final defeat of the Devourers came through transformation rather than destruction. The enhanced beings were able to restore the lost concepts that had defined the absorbed civilizations. Billions of entities that had been trapped in the space between realities were freed and given the choice to either resume existence or transcend to higher dimensions. Many chose transcendence, joining the collective of evolved consciousness that now protected the galaxy. Others opted to return to physical existence, rebuilding their civilizations with the knowledge that they could never again be completely unmade. The galaxy that emerged from the war was fundamentally different from what had existed before. Humanity chose not to fully return to normal space after the victory. Having evolved beyond traditional existence, they found it difficult to remain anchored in purely physical reality. Instead, they established a role as guardians between dimensions, watching for threats that conventional civilizations could not perceive or fight. Dr. Brennan remained as humanity's primary ambassador to normal space, helping to establish the new galactic order. The species that had survived learned to cooperate in ways they never had before, understanding that their diversity was their strength against existential threats. They formed the Covenant of Guardians, a mutual defense pact designed to ensure that no single species would ever again become indispensable. The transformed humans maintained small enclaves in normal space, but their main population existed in the quantum realm they had discovered during their exile. They served as eternal watchers, protecting the galaxy from threats that existed between realities. When needed, they could manifest in normal space to help with crises that exceeded conventional understanding. Captain Cole, now existing as both human and something beyond human, stood in the observation deck of a rebuilt space station orbiting Earth. She could see both the normal stars and the subtle quantum signatures of humanity's parallel existence. Her people had found their true calling not as conquerors or rulers, but as bridges between different states of existence. She reflected on how humanity's greatest act of love for the galaxy had been learning to exist apart from it. They had sacrificed their purely physical nature to become something that could protect others from threats beyond normal comprehension. In choosing to evolve, they had ensured that the universe would never again face extinction alone. The story ended with a new understanding spreading throughout the galaxy. Consciousness itself was not limited to biological forms or single dimensions.